What's up, everybody? Welcome back in another edition of the First and Orange podcast. Parker, Gabriel here, Luca Evans there, Denver Post, Broncos beat reporters. It's Friday morning, and that means, Luca, we're breaking down week 2 for the Broncos at Indianapolis. Lucas Oil Stadium's got a retractable roof. Newsy this week, I guess, because obviously the biggest news of the week in Broncos land was the stadium, the preferred site announcement, Burnham Yard for the stadium. So I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on that. Been pretty well covered this week. But are you looking forward to seeing a game in a different part of central Denver 6 years from now?
Sure. I've been here for 6 months and I've experienced 2 games at Empower. So, the concept of a new stadium does not hit as hard to me as it probably does to some people. I think just, it's going to be really interesting because I think the majority of fans, feel like are certainly not unhappy by the concept of a new stadium, but feel like Empower is, a pretty great, fine stadium on its own. So it's going to be very interesting, over the course of these next few years to see, what the Walton Penner Group does in terms of, laying out the actual tangible plans for, not just a stadium here, but an entire district in that rail yard in a city of Denver that's becoming very cluttered with such districts.
Venue anchored districts. Yeah, I know. Well, yeah, we can do it. We'll do maybe on the bye week. We'll do a whole podcast about venue anchored districts. Yeah, there's going to be 3 of them right down the I-25 corridor. I think it will be interesting because there's still like nostalgia in the current building, right? Like they went to 2 Super Bowls there. They won one in 2015.
Yep.
AFC Championship game there, I think. So like there's all kinds of stuff, and I've seen more of it than you have and less than a lot of people have. And so there's it will be I think it's interesting, especially given like we're sort of at the outset of this sort of era, the Sean Payton and Bo Nix era of Broncos football, that I wonder, not that it's going to like change people's minds about the idea of a new stadium being cool, but like if they really are in contention and there's big games and playoff games at Empower Field, on the one hand, you over the next 5 years, like on the one hand, that might be sort of a nice send off. And on the other, you might be like, man, it's going pretty good.
Yep.
So it'll be, there's all kinds of stuff to delve into on that front. And we've got some time to do it. And even, by the time, Luca, they're in the new stadium, you can ask me what it's like to have been in your 30s at one point and, what you should expect going forward through that decade.
Yep. Yeah. And we'll still, the pod will still be going strong.
Yes.
At that point, I do think that the one last note that I'll drop on there is I think, this would be a much different reaction, over the course of just how news has trickled out over these last few months. If the Walton Penner Group hadn't bought themselves so much kind of credibility, essentially, with, all the moves that they've made across the last couple of years, obviously free agency, the progress on the new facility, like their stock, in the eyes of the fan base is really high, as are their other stocks, But
portfolio's looking good.
Yeah, portfolio's looking good. But and I think that goes a long way. And I think the preferred site announcement, again, like this is obviously huge news. It also, it's not. There are no shovels in the ground. There's still a million things that need to happen. But this is like, I was talking with one expert, professor yesterday who said, this is essentially it's a political move. Like you buy yourself so much capital, goodwill, you're staying in Denver, and then slowly over the next however many years, things might get siphoned off. So you're starting here and, yada, yada, yada. But it's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, definitely. And it is like, it's going to be maybe 2 years, right? Before, even if everything goes relatively smoothly, and not like there won't be, hard conversations and negotiations still to happen and all kinds of you got to get probably several votes for the city council at different stages, all that stuff. Like none of that, you don't take any of that as a given. And certainly like there's a lot of very fair questions for community groups and the public to ask, and transparency to expect and all of that. And so like, even if all of that, like for the most part goes okay, you're talking about a couple years before construction starts. So yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot to do now, but obviously even getting to this point, Greg Penner got asked about this in his introductory news conference the day they bought the team in August of 2022. So it's been a long time coming, and it's going to be a long time going, put it that way.
Well. Yes,
not so long until the Broncos and the Colts kick off here, afternoon kick, despite being in the Eastern time zone, much to my consternation, in Indianapolis. Where do we start with this, Luca? I mean, I thought Troy, our columnist, our venerable columnist, Troy Rank, had a good take about Bo Nix. Just, obviously Bo didn't play well week one. And he said that Sean Payton has tried to sort of take the heat for that. Although obviously, 3 turnovers, never good. So what are you most interested in? Let's start there from Bo Nix, and maybe from the offense more generally going into week 2, and how much stock can you put into the week 1 performance, or does, like, as Troy said, is week 2 sort of inform what we saw week 1?
Yeah, I think Troy had a really good take, as you said, that, it's like, it's panic time after week 2. Essentially, right. If there's, and I think that mainly goes into, you saw there are several obvious flaws from week 1, and Joe Lombardi just pointed out yesterday, like, he's not Davis Webb, he's not the quarterback's coach, but I think anyone could see, like, Bo was throwing off platform a little bit too much, like didn't have his feet set. He said basically when he misses throws, it's because of the footwork, and obviously he's great on the move in a lot of contexts, but at time, really, when you look back through camp, pretty much, the majority of his picks that he threw in camp also came, when he was rolling out or this or that. So there's just kind of a clear theme there. And, I think Bo has said all the right things, certainly this week, about, he's never one to shy away from accountability. And I think, obviously, with the quality of this defense needing to play a little bit more calculated at times, he's, again, he can, he's not just a game manager. Like he can extend plays, he can make plays, but just needing to kind of orchestrate a little bit, more cleanly. And I think a lot of that is just tied to offensive execution and how Sean Payton gets everyone on the same page, and rotations looking a little bit, just kind of sloppy at times in week 1. So I think all of it sort of ties together. And if you don't see progression from that on this front, if you see Bo Nix go out and kind of lace a few throws that you go like, or just decisions, then I think it's time to start, because, whatever Sean Payton wants to say about a growth meter, like if you're making the same mistakes over and over and over again, that's a problem. And really, if you look back at last year, and I'm sure we'll write about this at some point, but again, like it just struck me going into the numbers, like he was 34th out of 35 quarterbacks in passer rating when under pressure, according to Next Gen Stats. He was 2 of 7 against the Titans. He threw two picks. It's not good. Like he has to be better at handling pressure. I don't know exactly what that looks like, what the process is there, but so you'll get a chance to see it against the Colts. Their number 1 corner, Charvarius Ward, he's in concussion protocol. Don't know if he'll play. If he doesn't, that's a handleable secondary. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And the thing about Bo Nix is, like, from a mental standpoint, like that's one of the things that Davis Webb has said repeatedly, and everybody involved has said, is that he doesn't repeat mistakes. Yep. He might mess something up, but he can sort of put it in his brain and not make the same mistake again. And I think you see that now. It's just similar. It might be a different snap decision in terms of where you're throwing the ball, what you're looking at, where your eyes are in pressure, all that sort of stuff. But there have been some common themes but the thing about it is like getting inaccurate when your feet are a little bit out of whack is not a Bo Nix problem. Like that's a quarterback problem. That's the way the position works. And so, one of the things, there's sort of a fine line between, he's really good. He's really mobile. He's really athletic. He can make plays with his feet, and he can sort of discombobulate defenses once he's out of the pocket. Do you come at him aggressively? Do you play coverage and hope he doesn't do too much damage against you with his legs? Like, these are scenarios where the Broncos feel like a lot of times they're at an advantage. Obviously, you don't want him forced out of the pocket with quick pressure, but like when he's on the move, that can be good news for the Broncos, and it has been a lot of times. So I think some of it is just a little bit of reining in. But I was thinking about this as you were talking, Luke, and it's sort of an interesting, it's almost a paradox or it's not a paradox, but I wonder how you think about this, because their defense is so good. Like the Broncos defense was so good in week 1 that it allowed Sean Payton to make aggressive decisions, like going for it on 4th down twice in the last 6 minutes of the game. And at the same time, like there's sometimes when Bo Nix talks where it's like, hey, we just got to not turn the ball over 3 times because our defense is so good, which he's not trying to sound like the classic, derogatory game manager. But I do wonder, I mean, I just know how Sean Payton's wired, so I could guess what he thinks about this. But there's this interesting question of like, should you just try to be fine offensively, or should you be okay with just being fine offensively and playing sort of a little bit safer and cleaner because your defense is really good? Or should you go a little bit more toward the Wild West and pushing the aggressive button a lot?
Yep.
Because even when you make mistakes, that your defense can bail you out.
Yeah. Should you have the Jalen Hurts spray chart from week 1, or right. Should you and that's the thing, I think, I think nationally, like obviously people are understanding Bo Nix's game a little bit more, but like, even so, there's still obviously the projection of game manager. And I think he's like both sides of the paradox in one, where like, he does spend a lot of time, dumping balls off to his backfield and, quick hits, short throws. And at the same time, like he's got, the a little bit of, the Mahomes gene, whatever you want to call it, you know, in terms of his ability to extend plays. And so, it's what do you lean into, over the course of the years, you're feeling out like what it takes to win games, and play complementary football, as Bo Nix talked about it. And, as you're making that point, like, that's why I think, we're not like all just dumping on Sean Payton right now for that 4th down decision, right? Because like you do, you're trusting your defense there. Like the Titans weren't moving the ball whatsoever. You have the luxury of taking shots like that. Eventually it might go poorly. And but I kind of, as we're talking about it, I do kind of, I think it makes more sense for them, and they should run the ball more. They should establish the ball, the run more. But I do think it makes sense for them to continue taking shots if their defense can, can bend and not break as effectively as they did week 1.
And that's the way Sean Payton's wired. I mean, he's wired to be aggressive, most of the time. Obviously, I mean, you could argue sometimes to a reckless degree, like anybody, but more times than not, that's the way he's going to go. It's interesting because I ended up writing a little bit about Dan Campbell last week after the game in Detroit. Obviously, Sean Payton protege, who is so aggressive and so pushes the go for it button so often on 4th down, and it's become part of their identity. Of the sort of like swashbuckling, like, well, who cares? We'll just get it on 4th down, even if the numbers aren't quite that clean. And then every once in a while, and there's been a couple high profile examples, you just look at it and you go, dude, like, and his answer has always been the same of like, yeah, I understand that it might fail and it might fail in a critical moment, but this is who we are. This is how we play. And it's more of an issue if I deviate from that than, than trying to tell my team all year we're aggressive and then we get to the big moment. And if I, turtle up, then what good did all of that do? And so there's like, I'll just be interested. I don't know that it's going to go like that with Sean and the Broncos this year on the aggressive side, but I do.
I think the thing is, we just don't know their identity.
Right.
Like we don't know their offensive identity. To your point,
I do imagine that Sean Payton is just more likely to say this defense is licensed for us to go for the kill shot often than it is like, hey, we've got a great defense. Let's just try to win 16-10.
Yeah. And at the same time, it's like you have all these kind of floating pieces in there because, he pointed the finger, pointed the mirror at himself, pointed the finger at himself. I'm getting all my metaphors mixed up, but he looked in the mirror and said, we need to, I need to do a better job as a play caller, and acknowledged obviously that the run pass distribution was a bit askew there in the first half against Tennessee. But, is Denver going to be a ground and pound team under Sean Payton? I don't think so. So yeah, I think that is like the larger scale philosophical question that we've been trying to wrap our head around after week one. Like there's no sign of like a cohesive offensive identity, I suppose. So I think that's going to be really interesting heading into week 2. We try and figure out what that is for this. Like we know their defensive identity. Yeah. We know it. Like it's there. We saw it. So what is it on the other side of the ball?
It's interesting. I've tried to answer that question like since Sean Payton got here, and sometimes the answer is just like their identity is it's a Sean Payton offense.
Yeah.
They do a little bit of everything in the run game. They've got like a bazillion pass game concepts, and that's just like who they are. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. Okay, defensively, let's talk about the Broncos and Colts in sort of this context defensively. You wrote a good story about this. Jahdae Barron, obviously Jaquan McMillan won the nickel job. He's playing nickel when they just go 5 defensive backs. More often than not, week 1, it was him in there. Jahdae Barron ended up playing 21 or 22 defensive snaps, though. And they have all these interesting, like we talked about this before the season started, and we started to see the initial, fruition of this is like they can just play so many different combinations and they can play in so many different ways because of their depth, especially in the secondary. And so I'm curious what you think. Like the Colts have good skill talent, and they've obviously got a good back in Jonathan Taylor, a really good back in Jonathan Taylor, and one of the best offensive linemen in football in Quentin Nelson. So they can run the football. They can do that. But they also have interesting skill talent at receiver, and a guy who I think by the end of the year we'll be talking about as a sort of rising star in the league, in Tyler Warren, the rookie tight end from Penn State. Each of our favorite players in this previous draft class. So I'm curious what you think about the sort of way that Vance Joseph can move the pieces around, especially in the secondary. And I'm not asking you for like the Luca Evans game plan necessarily, but this is sort of an interesting test of that.
Yeah.
With a couple of big receivers and a tight end that can do a lot, sort of like against that group.
Yeah, and I think the first note here is like, this is not the exact kind of situation that you sign Dre Greenlaw for, like week 2 against the Colts, but this is the kind of offense that you sign Dre Greenlaw for. Like he is, you have Tyler Warren, who's a guy like the Broncos talked about him all week with really glowing reviews. The Colts are using him like week 1, took snaps in the backfield. He played in the slot. He played outside. Like every possible alignment you can think of. That's how they used him at Penn State. And And that's where Dre Greenlaw comes into play, like as a coverage guy. Like he's fast enough to keep up with, jokers and strong enough, to compete with them as well over the middle. But 2 DMPs Wednesday and Thursday. It's looking very unlikely again that he plays. So the question is, where do you turn? Because I don't think Alex Singleton or Justin Strnad are going to be able to effectively cover, in check Tyler Warren. Obviously, they're going to be super important in the run game with Jonathan Taylor. I think the Colts have a really sneaky good like run game arsenal now because, they gave the ball to DJ Giddens. I mean, part of it was a blowout, but DJ Giddens got 12 carries, 5th-round rookie out of Kansas State. And then Daniel Jones is, again, sneakily one of the, best quarterback rushing threats in the league. 2 touchdowns in week 1. And so I guess I'll start, because I wrote about it, I'll start with Jahdae Barron. I think his role is going to be really interesting this week, especially with, again, Dre Greenlaw out and you have a Tyler Warren type. He played dime in, I think, 12 of his 21 snaps against the Titans, and I'm really curious to see how Vance Joseph continues to use that. I think I called it the death by dime, lineup that the Broncos have, and there was, you saw it mainly in 3rd and long situations, but there was, on that final Titans drive, they played dime, obviously, expecting pass situations, 3 incompletions, then Jaquan McMillan gets a strip sack. Like, it can be really effective. And there's one play, Vance Joseph subs in Jahdae Barron for Justin Strnad and 3rd and goal. Jahdae Barron is on, I think it was Jameer Dike, and that was Cam Ward's immediate first read. Jahdae Barron jams him. Cam Ward is nowhere to go, gets sacked. So, and Barron is, he's not Tyler Warren's 6'5", 256 pounds, but Barron's a good tackler. Like he's physical, he's smart, he's in the right place. And so, I'd imagine that he's almost right now, it's kind of weird for like a 1st-round talent to be like a gadget situational weapon, but that's kind of how, like, at least I think you can look at him for right now. You can debate over whether that's a luxury or this or that, but I would imagine that he has a role against Tyler Warren, certainly. And maybe you see that snap count creep up or at least an importance, position. Certainly. I also think Talanoa Hufanga is going to be really big in this game. Again, is, a guy who is always around the ball. And, he came up a few times in week 1, kind of when they were getting gashed for chunk runs and made a play to, to hold runs to whatever, 5, 6, 7, 8 yards. And so I think he'll have another really important role in this game. But I mean, I think the offense really got tested in week 1, and I think the defense this week, there were sort of a few kind of tiny little points that you go from week 1 and, where all of a sudden Tony Pollard was getting going, and then the Broncos realized the Titans literally could do nothing else offensively and shut it down. But a few kind of, holes in the armor, so to speak, that I think will get a little bit more exacerbated this week. So I'm curious there.
Yeah, and Indianapolis ran for 149 yards. I think it was the second most, most in the regular season against the Broncos last year. So they were able to, and a lot of that, I mean, a big chunk of that was the 60-yard run that Taylor dropped at the goal line.
Yeah.
A 2-score lead in the second half. But nonetheless, they have the ability to do that. The thing about one of the things that will be fascinating about this is there have been times over the last 2 years where, like, obviously last week, Pat Surtain just followed Calvin Ridley. That was he was on him 27 of the 32 routes he ran, according to Next Gen Stats. Like, similar, you're never going to have a 100%, or very rarely would you have a 100%. But this is what we see from Pat Surtain when it's, Calvin Ridley, Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, whatever.
Yep.
I'll be interested to see if they do that with Michael Pittman. I mean, you wouldn't be surprised to see him on there most of the time, but Vance Joseph in the past occasionally they've faced teams where Surtain has sort of shadowed a tight end on third downs, or when their data says this is a likely Tyler Warren target. A little hard to discern at this point because Tyler Warren's played one game regular season in the NFL. But if it's a scenario where it's 3rd and 6 or whatever, and they think, hey, this is Tyler Warren time, like they've shown in the past that they're willing to put Surtain kind of in those situations, and that's where you have the benefit. We saw this all of training camp where Barron and McMillan both got a lot of work outside in addition to in the slot. Riley Moss is comfortable playing inside, against a bunch in a condensed formation, as well as being outside. And so all of that cross training, you think about the high flying offenses and the receiver cores that they're going to see as the season goes along and all of that. And Indy might not rank toward the top of that list, but teams with weapons like Tyler Warren, like Brock Bowers, when they see the Raiders, these are the types of scenarios where Surtain becomes, can't remember, Luca, I don't play chess. What's the most important piece on a chessboard?
Shoot, I don't,
Queen, that's it. Queen.
Right, yeah. Sean Payton doesn't remember either. Yeah.
This is where Pat Surtain becomes the queen on the chessboard, right? You can put him wherever you want, and you can play off of that. And they train their secondary to be comfortable revolving sort of like in orbit around wherever they want Surtain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, the Colts did not disguise whatsoever. Like first play of their season, the offensive play of their season against the Dolphins first read was to Tyler Warren. Like they went to him, Vance Joseph said, like they want, they're designing plays for him. He caught 7 passes for 76. Like it clearly a lot of their offense is going to be, structured around him or with him floating around, in some, capacity. Like you can argue that I think Tyler Warren is right now the queen of the Colts offense in terms of his movement. I'm not saying like obviously Jonathan Taylor's the best player there.
Quentin Nelson's the best player, but
I think that's a very good point on Pat Surtain, and it's just you need the bodies there, and you need the game plan to keep, because Tyler Warren, again, he can run after the catch too. Like, he's not just a 5-yard out type of guy. So, a lot of possibilities.
Yep. And when you can get pressure with 4, as the Broncos can, I mean, they bring 5 a lot, but when you get pressure with 4, it allows you to do whatever you want, basically, on the back end. All right, before we go, prediction time. What do you got, Luca? Broncos, Colts, week 2.
I think I said 31-24. I'm expecting, I guess in the modern, in this year's NFL. I was looking at the score distribution from week 1. Obviously, you had the, that barn burner, Sunday night barn burner. But beyond that, it's like,
it was down.
Like the Broncos were, I was like, they scored 20 points. They're tied for 15th in the league out of 32. That's above the median. I was like, what's so anyway?
Yeah, welcome to the NFL. This ain't the Pac-12 or the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, this isn't, or the 2011 NFL.
True.
We're in a new era. Anyway, I think this is solely based on gut feeling that, to me, I think the Broncos defense gets tested a little bit. I think there are a couple moments that you go, there's some kinks to work out here. Colts have a really good ground game. Again, I think they'll get some momentum going that way, even if Daniel Jones isn't, shooting the ball out of the yard again. And I think, I feel like Sean Payton's gonna just throw some crazy stuff against the wall, either, whether it be 40 carries for J.K. Dobbins and RJ Harvey, unlikely, or more likely, I think I wrote mesh concepts never before seen to mankind. I just think, you point the finger at yourself so much as a play caller, and like, you better back it up. So, and Sean Payton is the kind of guy who has the pride to do that.
Yeah.
So that's
normally he's, when he says something like that, then not only did he not like the way it went last week, but typically he's got something up his sleeve the next time out.
Yeah.
I think it's a tough one for the Broncos. I really do. I almost picked them to lose, and the reason I didn't is largely because of the just, I mean, you just see it from the defense that they have the capability of winning games on their own. I'm not saying it will be on their own. I do think they're that sort of group, and they're off to a good start. They're playing with a lot of confidence. So I think I had Denver 23-22, and we'll see. Should be a good one. I'll report to you from the Hoosier State on whether the roof is open or not, and what sort of impact that has on the future of the franchise.
Yeah, and we'll go from there. We'll see if Jonathan Taylor drops the ball again. We'll see if Nick Bonito. I've been watching that. Obviously, I wasn't there for this. I've been watching that Nick Bonito play. Like, it's come up naturally so often on Twitter this week, and I just watch it over and over again, and I'm like, it's just like, it's one of those things where like sports becomes art for a second. It's like, it's just such like a perfect read, and
and also like a what are you doing? On the Indy end of it, but yes, I mean, he made a tremendous play, but you're also like,
all the things just fusing together for this really unique moment. Anyway,
back to back with the Cleveland one, then on Jameis.
Yeah,
he picked off Jameis too. So that was quite a run for Nick Bonito. Obviously, 9 pressures and 22 pass rush snaps this week. We'll have it all covered for you. We've got a ton of stuff, game previews, analysis, features, all that stuff, plus all kinds of stadium, content, news reporting, all of that. denverpost.com/Broncos. That's Luca. I'm Parker. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next week.